All right, let's get to the second game. Friday night, Oregon, Indiana. Indiana 3.5 point favorite in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Total, we'll call it 47-ish as of right now. This game will kick Friday, 7:30 Eastern on ESPN. It's a rematch from earlier this season when Indiana went to Eugene and frankly pretty much dominated that game. They did so just I went back and watched that game. So I was like, all right, well, first of all, what has changed? Like, there's some things that have changed with Oregon and with Indiana, a couple injuries. Oregon, by the way, has lost a couple backs, including Davison, who has a broken clavicle. They still have, Whittington and Hill, but their depth at running back, one of their strengths is they just roll out a number of guys, has been tested. But when I went back and watched that game, it's it was because if you look at just the rosters, right? Oregon has more pure talent. So if you just look at like stars and blue chips, but Indiana has more grown men, right? They're all like seniors are all old. They were the more physical team. They dominated that game at the line of scrimmage on both sides. They pressured Dante Moore, and he has been very bad under pressure this year. And he's been very lucky against the blitz. And you got to think about some of the teams he's faced that blitz or impoverished defenses. And whenever Dante Moore has gone up against like a really good defense, the Oregon offenses look pretty pedestrian. But they pressured him on over 50, close to 50% of his dropbacks. He was under fire all day long. And one of the reasons that I was worried about Texas Tech last week is they're not efficient at running the ball. Well, that's not the case with Indiana. That's what you want to do against Oregon. Run the ball, get into third and manageable situations, and I think that's what Indiana is going to be able to do here. And this Indiana team is just they every time out there under Sig, they just out execute everybody. And I think that's how they're going to win this game. And if you just match up, like, okay, what are the strengths and weaknesses? These are obviously two elite teams. The strengths and weaknesses of both teams. Like Indiana, you can hit them aggressive defense. You can hit them for some explosives, but Oregon's not like particularly explosive. I don't think they're going to hit a ton of explosives here. The main difference, and then you look at, okay, well, we're going to be able to run the ball. Not really against Indiana. So I think they're going to be in more third and long situations where those pressure packages, which have been amazing from Indiana and that defensive staff all year, are going to come into play again. We'll see what the adjustments from Oregon is, right? They're going to adjust from the blitzes but Indiana is going to have some adjustments too. So there's a nice cat and mouse game there. But the one weakness here, or like when you overlap these teams, is the Indiana offensive line in the run game versus the Oregon defensive line. They should be able to get a push here. That should set them up for third and manageable. Indiana's number one in the country in average third down distance. I think that's where they win this game. Indiana just a little better offense, a little better defense, grown men. And I'll sum it up in like five stats or four stats. Third down defense, Indiana's fourth in the country, 29%. Oregon is 41st. Indiana, third down offense, number one by a wide margin at 55%. It's a number you rarely see. Maybe, I don't know, five or six teams over the last 10 years have hit that clip if you exclude a couple Army teams from 2017-18. Oregon, 28th. Giveaways per game. Indiana, 0.6, fourth in the country. I mean, they're top five in all these do you beat yourself stats. Oregon, zero point 0.9, still very good, but 21st. How about penalties per game? Indiana 3.4, third. Oregon 5.2, 33rd. So like all of these like execution, well coached, third downs, offense, third down defense, the high leverage downs, penalties, turnovers. I think all of those tilt towards Indiana. Grown men in the trenches. I think that's where they get it done. I think Indiana wins this game, but I make it like four. So I want a three. I do have a bunch of Indiana money line exposure to close out a couple parlays that I'll just be riding with. If this number gets down to three, I'll be adding to Indiana. We'll look for them live. Money line is a dog as well. But I think that's where they win this game. I think this will be a really competitive game. I'm so curious to see what the adjustments are because this is a rematch, right? And that might give a little bit of an edge to Oregon because they're going to maybe they're more likely to make the adjustments. But I trust this Indiana team and this staff to come up with some adjustments and not do the same things they did from a defensive perspective. Mendoza, I think his legs might come into play here. That's a spot where Oregon is a little more vulnerable. Why not use his legs? I mean, maybe you're like the kid's future, but like this is to go to the national championship. Use his legs a little bit more, some more quarterback designed runs. I think they can pressure more, force him into mistakes. I think it'll be close, relatively speaking, but I think Indiana gets it done. In Sig, we trust. Duck, I'll go to you next. What are you seeing here in Oregon, Indiana?
I mean, I did play the first half under way early before we saw some movement in this total, but Indiana has just been incredible. Absolutely has proven that they belong as the front runner, as the favorite to win these FBS playoff national championship. And really, they've spoken loudest in the trenches. Their trench play has just been absolutely lights out. You knew in the first three drives against Alabama that they were not going to be able to move the football and score a lot of points there, and it allowed the offense to just run the ball, be vanilla. They didn't have to give a lot away. They didn't have to take a lot of chances. It was a really, really buttoned up, impressive performance. And it's interesting in that first meeting of the season between Oregon and Indiana. I mean, Oregon scored one offensive touchdown. They ran the ball 30 times for 81 yards. Indiana has given up some explosiveness on the ground this season, but seventh nationally in yards per carry, surrendered fourth in overall defensive success rate. I just don't see Oregon lining up with the ability to run the ball. So now you're going to task Dante Moore in throwing against an elite Indiana secondary. I'd say it was average the first meeting. I think he completed 21 of 34 for less than 200 yards, had a couple picks. If you get pressure with him, it's going to be really tricky here. And the way that this Indiana team, everything they're doing, everything they say, they show up on every single play for 60 minutes. I would not want to fade Signetti here.
Yeah, I think, but I Bregnon, the guard for Oregon, I think he's one of the best offensive linemen in the country, in my opinion. But I think that Harkey and World, their tackles are overrated. I know World is like loved by a lot of NFL scouts, but these are guys who came from Nevada and Texas State. They got abused in the first matchup. When I watch them against like really, really elite defenses, they can be beat. And Indiana beat them in the first meeting. I think they'll be able to beat them here. The Indiana offensive line, that's the most improved unit for on Indiana's team from last year. They have elite trenches now. I mean, Carter Smith is incredible at tackle. Pat Coogan, um, Drew Evans, who was hurt late last year in the College Football Playoff, he's incredible at guard. This offensive line, I'll take the Indiana offensive line over the Oregon offensive line. That's important here. Yeah, I agree with you on the Hoosiers. Calabrese, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, I would love to get a three, but I'm just going to take the money line pregame on Indiana, lay the minus 175. And to me, it's as simple as this Dante Moore profile. Because you look around the internet right now, and God save him, he's mocked to the New York Jets, second overall in the NFL draft this spring. I don't see an elite, unflappable college quarterback when he plays against really good defenses. I see game manager plus. But in this matchup, for some reason, the market is still viewing him as someone who can elevate this Oregon team over Indiana. And he can when the running game's cooking, when he's working with his RPOs, his play action game, when he's operating from a clean pocket, as you brought up, Stuck. He's capable of putting up big numbers. 77% of his dropbacks, he was operating from a clean pocket this fall, and he cooked up 27 big time throws in those environments, 25 TDs against his six picks, with an adjusted completion percentage of 83.4%. But that is all built on Dan Lanning's roster architecture. Elite offensive line, a stable of running backs, which is important now because they're down Davison as well. So now really only two guys who have experience this season and a blue chip pedigree, and a playbook that was devised by Will Stein, who's no longer there. So I look at this as like a lot of his stats, Dante Moore's, it was a bit of empty calories. Over a third of his passing touchdowns came when Oregon was up by 22 points or more this season. But when the chips were down and he was facing elite defenses, it was a different story. Penn State, Iowa, Indiana, Texas Tech, all top 25 defenses. QBR in those games, 51.8 out of 100, 6.1 yards per attempt, four touchdowns, four picks. So I look at this as if the running game is contained and he has to be the guy in known passing situations. I think he turns from a top NFL draft pick into just another guy. And Indiana sacked him six times in their first meeting. And how did their defense do without Daly, which I think was a critical talking point going into the Rose Bowl? 40 dropbacks for Simpson and Mack in that Rose Bowl for Bama, 16 pressures. That's 40% of the time. When you look at what Moore has been accustomed to, he's had an awesome offensive line in front of him with just a 23% pressure rate. That doubled against Indiana in the first meeting. 48% of his dropbacks, he was under fire. So I think they're going to make life miserable for this kid. I think they also have the run defense to put him in those known, passing situations early and often. They were top 5 in rushing success, top 5 in line yards and tackling. I just don't see this guy pulling the rabbit out of his hat and making the big plays to get them over the hump. It may end up being a lower scoring game. That's why I'm not interested in laying the 4.5. But minus 175, like I said before the Bama game, I think we're going to look back and wish we had more invested in Cignetti. He's somebody that we've been, tailing since he got to Indiana. Why stop now?
Yeah, Will Stein will be coaching, right? He just left the team this week.
I would say, just,
Yeah.
to frame that properly, kind of in the same light as 1 foot out the door, where's his head? Charlie Weiss Jr. situation, same thing going on with Ole Miss and LSU. A lot of prep needs to be done against Cignetti, who is an ultimate prep kind of guy. So I think in that situational football, all the stats that you brought up, particularly on third downs, that's where Indiana wins the day.
Colin, what are you seeing here? You actually like the Ducks. You're
Yeah.
fading Sig.
Well,
Good luck.
I think it's important to lay out the financial plan for everybody. I do have an Oregon 15-1 in the app, Oregon 15-1 ticket on hand. I also bet Oregon +4, which has gone to 3.5. I would still bet 3.5. I'm not sure Oregon's going to win this game, but they're going to cover this number. They're going to, and I'll take any bets. They're going to cover this number. I think and that's tough to say because right now Indiana's playing so clean, it's almost immaculate. It's like a 6-0-6-0 set from ladies tennis. I mean, it's just insane. Like you can't even try to poke holes into the stats and the analytics and the game logs and the yards per play and the Cignetti calls and watching him live on the field at the Rose Bowl, like what he does, like when the defense is on the field, he stands completely back on the other side of the sidelines and just it says one thing and then the whole defense changes. Like it's amazing what this team is like a machine. They're like the Empire. It's crazy. But how is Oregon going to cover this number? And just to let everybody know, that is what I'm going into this pregame. I will be betting Indiana live if they fall to money line -110 or have plus anywhere beside them. I will be doing that. Not so much with Ole Miss Miami. I am doing it here. So Oregon is the game is going in, and I like the over here. Because if you go back and look at week 7, which I think you should throw out the window, but red zone and third downs are what determine that game. And Oregon has to be better in red zone attempts, both offensively and defensively, and in third down. And if they're not going to win this game at all. But I think there's an avenue to where this is a different team than what we saw in week 7. I know you can go back and look at all the logs and see how they've kind of morphed and changed defensively. They grinded out the Iowa game on the ground, but now they're missing their biggest piece as a running back. They're going to have to pass it more. Decoring Moore only got 2 targets against Texas Tech. I think they're playing a little coy with him. I think he's more healthy than they think. Evan Stewart, we're going to see the availability report is again coming out in 5 minutes as we record this. If they can't get it done on the ground, because inside zone has been good for Oregon, they produced 63%, but there's nothing you can run that Indiana can't sniff out. They've been elite against every run concept. They've stopped everybody from running the ball. I expect Oregon to average maybe 2.5 yards per play on the ground. That might be nice. Indiana's vulnerability is against the explosive pass. I mean, their numbers, you look up and down, the whole entire thing is green except for one area. Passing downs, explosives allowed, and creating a contested catch. Passing downs, explosives allowed, 82nd in the nation. Creating a contested catch, 62nd. You can go out to CFB stats. They're outside the top 25 when it comes to allowing 10 plus and 20 plus yard passes. Now, that's a little
It's an aggressive defense. They're going to allow some
And-
plays to get behind them.
And if that happens here, they have to be good enough in tackling. And I'm just trying to make a case to say this is how Oregon's going to work downfield. It's a fast track. It kind of plays into their favor. We'll see if they can keep Dante Moore up. We'll see if and by the way, against Texas Tech, average depth of target, 6.2 yards, but they still had a half dozen explosive plays in the passing game. They're allowing their receivers to do all the work. It's not really Dante Moore like looking deep shots. He will take a shot. Really, the wide receivers have been the beef of this offense. But Indiana's only 46 in creating pass breakups. And if Oregon wants to win, they've got to go to the air. And Dante Moore's 58% against cover 3. He gets to see it again. Indiana's defense hasn't changed. And they allowed 9 explosive passes in total against Ohio State and Alabama in consecutive games. So If Oregon can have a little bit better red zone luck, I think they can get points on the board and have enough to get the over and to cover this game. But the real change is on the defense. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. I mean, yeah, I've been a big proponent of Indiana and Kalen Black running power and Roman Himby running inside zone. Like I said, they are immaculate. They are just tearing everybody apart. But Oregon has completely changed their defense. They've made a small little change on the back end that not a lot of people are talking about. Tosh Lupoi decided to leave a cover three, go to a cover two hybrid, and have Dylan Thieneman roam like Caleb Downs at Ohio State. It sucked against James Madison. I watched that. I watched the all 22 on that. They couldn't tackle anybody. They were letting everybody go by. I don't think Thieneman even knew how to play this roaming. You go back and watch Texas Tech, 5 missed tackles. They dominated them every single part of the defense, and Lupoi has thrown this little wrinkle in that's allowing them to kind of play Caleb Downs what he was doing last year in the playoff. And they've even admitted like this is what Ohio State did with to their defense in the playoff. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, and the fact that Oregon is 6th in PFF coverage and they're 10th in creating a contested catch. I just talked about Indiana. They can't contest catches and they don't create PBUs, but Oregon does at a top 10 level. And here's a stat I couldn't believe. Did you guys know that Fernando Mendoza has created a big time throw against every single FBS team on the Indiana schedule except one team? He didn't have one against Oregon in week 7. He had
Oh,
no.
we were throwing out that game.
He didn't have a big time throw.
The 10-point win on the road with even with a pick six, we're throwing that out, right?
Well, listen, Fernando Mendoza did not have a good game against Oregon.
You
And
know
now
who did have a good game against Oregon, though? Elijah Surratt. And they had no answers for him. 8 catches, 122 yards, touchdown. I think he's a problem in terms of what they're able to do, rolling coverage his way. And the other part of it, in terms of throwing into this Indiana defense, Ja'Cory Moore was healthy in that game. Sadiq was healthy. They had 6 catches total for 60 yards. If that is replicated in any way, shape, or form, if that duo does not go for 100 yards, I think Oregon's drawing dead
it
in this game.
wasn't
They
their
got to
game
find
plan.
ways.
It wasn't
Davison was the best player on offense that
their
day.
game plan was to line up and try to punch them in the face with the run game, and that's
But
not
they
gonna
also
work.
had a game flow in the second half where they needed to throw the ball to be able to get back in it, and they couldn't do it. So
Yeah, they pressured on
I think
20, 20 dropbacks. Yeah, Davison was their best player, and he's going to be out with a broken clavicle. The one change for the Oregon offense is they have finally realized that Benson is better than Bryant, who's now been pretty much phased out of the rotation. Johnson's emergence as well. I think the Oregon offense is a little bit better than it was then, but Indiana continues to improve. I mean, I just think this goes back to like what the Alabama handicap, Indiana, Alabama. One team's going to be able to run the ball, and one team's going to be able to generate more pressure consistently. And then Indiana is the most well executing team in the country. So I think that's the difference.
Listen, I think Indiana's going to create methodicals and they're going to get into scoring position, but they're not going to have explosive plays. They're not going to have explosive passes, and Hemby and Kalen Black are going to get tackled first time they get touched. So it
I mean,
really
you
comes
mentioned
down
that
to the red
Indiana
zone.
gives up explosives. I mean, Oregon's pass explosive. They're like in like the 65th percentile. This isn't like an Ole Miss passing offensive passing attack. And like you said that, oh, Alabama and Ohio State, who might have the two best receiving core. I'll take Alabama and Ohio State's wide receivers over Oregon's. You said that they hit, 6 explosives. They combined for 13 points.
9.
Nine
Alabama and
explosives,
Ohio State had 9
13
explosives.
points combined. And
Look,
those teams are more explosive than
I
Oregon.
said the results have to change in the red zone, right? Indiana can be taken in their secondary. The
And
Oregon's
they gave up
got to-
13 combined points to Alabama and Ohio State.
didn't you take Oregon to cover 2
In what game?
against Indiana here?
No,
I had Indiana in that game. Thanks for asking, Colin.
No, this game.
no, I have Indiana.
Oh, okay. Well,
Well, I have Indiana money line to close out some parlays.
all right.
I'm
I mean,
waiting
I'll
for
be on an
third.
island here, but Oregon's covering. So
All right, we shall see.